Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Turin Giants podcast, special edition. Today's Book Tuesday here on Turin Giants podcast. We always say reading is for losers unless it's an awesome book about Italian football. Our special guest today, I'm Farhad, host that loves you most. Almost forgot. And we're hosting our new friend, Dominic Hougham here. How are you, Dominic? Welcome.
Thank you. Very glad to be coming on to talk about Italian football. I think I'm very passionate about and very excited to go through it all with you and talk about that fantastic era of the late 80s and 90s when Italian football dominated the whole of Europe and was a beautiful thing to watch.
It was a beautiful thing. You love Italian football so much, you literally wrote a book on it, didn't you?
I did. It was funny. It was one of those things where I was doing some research actually for another project. I was looking over kind of European Cup wins and Cup Winners' Cup and UEFA. And I put them all in a spreadsheet and it's suddenly hit me. I mean, obviously I knew that Italy had been a great time at a great strong league at that time, but it hit me when I really looked at the European trophies, how dominant they were. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where I loved the football anyway. And I thought maybe that could be a good project for a book. And then you do the research to see if anybody's already covered it, just in case. And I was quite surprised to find no one had actually, given that how dominant Italian teams were across that period. No one had actually done it. I mean, there's obviously John Foot's book, Calcio, which is a fantastic book, one of the best books I've ever read on Italian football. But that's covering the whole history. But no one had gone into detail just on this kind of 10, 11-year period. So it was there to be written, and it was a perfect subject. And so I decided to give it a go. And it just, the more I got into it, the more I enjoyed it. And that's the key to writing any book, is write something about you're passionate about and that you enjoy. And I actually found it really pleasurable to write. Sometimes when you're writing, it can be a chore at times. Sometimes it's a grind. This one really, really wasn't. I mean, I won't say there weren't times when struggling, but it really was fun to do the research and fun to dig it all up, because I obviously knew some of the top line stuff, but you know, I'm English. I didn't live in Italy or anything at the time, so we only had limited exposure to Italian football. So going in detail and going back to YouTube and actually looking at getting deeper into the stories was a real joy.
But your least favorite chapters to write were about Inter, right? You admit it.
And there's Torino in there as well. There's a whole chapter on Torino.
We dislike Inter more. But before we get into all of the interesting stuff, I mean, as soon as my friend Christian sent me the link to your book, which I will be purchasing, by the way. I know you send me a PDF, but I will support the artist. Before we get into it, we didn't even give the name of the book. It is called Veni Vidi Vici, when Italian football ruled Europe. I apologize. It's a beautiful. The way it was presented to me was it's a coffee table book. I thought it was going to be beautiful photos and large print, but it is a chapter book. Really interesting. Let's mention some of the chapters here. It's like a for real book here. We have a.
Thank you.
We have an actual author on with us. We are usually a dog and pony show here with the funny sound effects, but it's so nice to host a person that actually knows what they're talking about. Before we get into some of the chapters here, tell your new fans how they can follow you, what kind of work we can go back and check out besides this book here.
My main exposure is on Twitter, or X now. I have an account on there which is just under my name, so if anyone goes to Dominic Hougham, you'll find that, and that's where I've been promoting the book. It's the second book I've done. I did a book on the World Cup, some of the greatest games in World Cup history, which was done before, and which I'll probably start pushing quite hard again at the end of the year with the next World Cup.
You're welcome to come back and talk about it. I'm being serious.
Probably nearer the World Cup would be a good time for that one. I also write for These Football Times, which is a magazine available in England. That's a beautifully done production. They do about one a month, and they'll get about 14 authors, and we each get given one subject under the heading. So it might be, for example, there has been a magazine on Juventus, there has been one on Napoli. Each of you get a chapter. You don't really choose, so it's nice. You write outside of your comfort zone. There's been ones where I obviously knew what I was writing, but somewhere I had to completely research from scratch and learn new things. So These Football Times has been great for me. I write for them. I'm doing an article at the moment, actually tonight, for them for their next magazine. But the main way to follow me is on Twitter. On X.
On X, yep. Yeah, it's. I love these. And they have a lot of them in Europe. Those beautifully made magazines that are kind of niche topics. And when I'm a sucker for a football magazine. I
Yeah.
subscribe to a bunch of them, and I'm very familiar with these Football Times. Really beautifully made illustrations, and that's what I need. I need illustrations. I am not mature enough for print.
No,
Give me something shiny.
they
Uh,
do a really good job, and it's all people who love football writing,
mhm.
writing for the magazine. And as I say, they do one on each subject each month. So they'll do a club, or they'll do a country. They've done special cultural ones, and it's just fun to, as I say, get out of your comfort zone. Sometimes they'll just give you a random subject. You're like, oh my god, I didn't know who this player was, but 2 weeks later, you know all about them. So
I have a picture saved on my phone. I think it is these Football Times. Oh no, it's 442 with Del Piero and Nedved on the cover.
right.
But these football, I think they've done big player specials, and
They've
it's
done a
an awesome.
Baggio. There's a Baggio special. They've definitely done most of the big clubs: Juve, Inter, Milan, Napoli, Fiorentina. They did. So they've done a lot of the big Italian clubs, and they've actually done some what they call calcio specials, where they do various stories. So yeah, I did one on Calgary, which was really fun. I didn't know much about Calgary, but I wrote about them and their crazy owner. And that was really fun to research. So yeah,
It's Italian football and crazy owners go hand in hand. You cannot
yes,
have, and
you'll find
that's
that is
why
a theme throughout the book. The book is almost as much about owners as it is about the teams.
we love that part of Italian football, the crazy owners, and sometimes it gets in the way. Deals are blocked, or there's a scandal, or oh man, Serie A. We're hurting because we are. It's a great league even today, but unfortunately the production and the promotion is lacking a little bit. But I truly believe the product that they put out is better than anything in the world. They if they only knew how to market it correctly, it would be number one again, like it was in the 90s and 80s. And that's where you come in. You have chapters here on the inception of Juve, Juve when it was dominating in the 80s and 90s. And there's obviously I'm mentioning Juve stuff. There's USA 94. Phenomena. It's about Ronaldo, and of course Maradona. How can you not have a chapter on him? Which chapter was the most difficult to do research on? That you remember?
Well, the most painful to do research on, and you'll know why, is obviously the fourth chapter, which is the Heysel disaster.
That's right.
Because the whole start of the book talks about the early domination, because the European Cup kind of spread between different countries. So you had people like Real Madrid. And then if you think about the 70s, you had Ajax winning it 3 times, and you had Bayern Munich winning it 3 times. It was jumping from country to country. And then the English really take over, and they win 7, I think it is, out of 8 in a row European Cups. They never lose a final. And then you get the Liverpool Juventus final, Heysel. So that's the big turning point in the story, because what happens is, obviously after the events of Heysel, the English get an indeterminate ban, which ends up lasting for about 5 or 6 years. They're out of Europe, and there's suddenly this vacuum, and it's who's going to take over the vacuum. And for about 3 years, it actually jumps around to places like Steaua Bucharest. It's not the big countries. Porto win a European Cup. And then it's then that point when Italy suddenly move in. You get Maradona going to Napoli as the catalyst, and then you get Milan coming to the fore under Berlusconi. So the Heysel disaster, is a big turning point to me. It was an important chapter, because it's when the English clubs really pull out of Europe and Italy gets the chance to take over. But obviously, going back, and I do remember it as a young child. I remember watching the final, and nobody really knew what was happening at the time. At first, there was conflicting news reports. Nobody, and it was a time of hooliganism, so everybody just thought it was a normal kind of hooliganism event. And then the full scope of the tragedy came out. So going back and watching old news footage of that was painful to do, but important. So that was probably one of the hardest to do, just in terms of emotion, because and having to write it, because you obviously want to get the balance just right in writing it, the respect there, and you want to talk about the events, but do it in a way that's respectful and not causing pain and not putting blame anywhere. I didn't want to try and get into any apportioning blame of what happened. It happened, and there were reasons, and I go into kind of the facts of the book. But it is a big turning point, and that was probably the most painful to kind of go back and research.
Yeah, because I've done plenty of research on it. I do these reels that we post online about Italian football just for fun, something creative, and doing research for it and comparing it to your chapter. You lay it out a lot more than what's available online, and I love that because there's so many details that I missed. But yeah, it's traumatizing once you see the images, when you do a little bit of research. I mean, I can't even imagine. When I learned that they proceeded with the game, it's just mind blowing in today's thankfully safety driven game, that they allowed that to go on. Just because I don't even know what kind of state of mind the players must have been in. But in the book you mentioned that they couldn't keep the word. The coach tried to keep the players, sequestered in the locker room, but people going in and out, they spilled the beans. And
I think they were more worried that if they actually cancelled the game, there would be more trouble. So they figured just play the game, get it over with. But I mean, a lot of the players, when they talk about their recollections, comment that their heart wasn't really in it. They were distracted from it.
Giovanni just joined us. Uncle Gio, what's up, dude?
How's it going?
I'm well.
Great to meet you,
Dominic. We just started talking about his book. We mentioned the Hazel disaster first. I didn't realize there were 600 people injured as well. Of course, we talk about the 39 angels, but 600 people injured, and I'm sure the emotional toll of the whole place is just you cannot unsee what people saw that day, which was pretty sad. And I'm glad you mentioned that. That's doing a real justice to those people, remembering their stories and names. And pretty sad, but we're not going to dwell on the sad part of it. Giovanni, he grew up watching the calcio of the 90s. Do you have any questions, any interesting topics for our guest here? Let me know, but we'll move on. Of course, I don't want to just mention the Juve players and Juve of the 90s. We will kind of go back and forth. And I don't think people realize nowadays the phenomenon that was Maradona in Napoli. And you have a chapter dedicated to it. Tell us, going back, first of all, have you ever, I know Giovanni is from the South. He's been to Napoli. He loves that area. And I'm sure he's seen the mini and, big shrines dedicated to Maradona. It's still there. It's still palpable, right? The presence of Maradona down south.
Just a number of people my age named Diego.
Dominic, doing the research about Maradona, is there anything that people don't know and don't realize the magnitude of his presence in Napoli?
I think what's important to realize is what Napoli were before. I mean, Napoli had never won. He'd won the Coppa Italia, but they'd never won like a Serie A or Serie A at that time. They were actually pretty close to relegation shortly before he joined the club. And it was such a seismic event. I mean, if you think about this now, he was coming off the '86 World Cup. He was one of the biggest players around. And for him to be playing at Napoli, rather than, if you think now who the biggest player is in the world, and you couldn't imagine him going to a team that had never won a major competition before. So Napoli snap him up. To them, the fans are just joyful that they've got such a great player. I think one of the things I would comment on is there's a lot of talk about only Maradona when people talk about Napoli, which is a bit unfair. He obviously was the catalyst for their performances and their success, but there was a supporting cast. There was Carnevali, there was Careca, was an amazing player, and I do go out of my way to kind of mention Careca because he was the Brazilian striker. He was fantastic as well. I mean, one player can't just carry a team on his own. I think the other thing with Maradona that you do realize when you go back and watch is the brutality of playing in Syria at that time.
Oh, we've seen the highlights.
Yeah, that's so. Whenever people do these discussions, when they'll say who is the greatest player of all time, is it Messi? Is it Ronaldo? Is it Maradona? One of the things you do have to remember when with someone like Maradona is he is getting kicked off the field. That was in the era when you could quite happily go sliding into the back of somebody.
The times.
Maybe you get a free kick if you're lucky, but definitely no yellow card or red. And he's playing in that era, so you have to give him credit for that. Incredible playing to it. And he was just so much fun to write about because unlike other players, there's the dark side of Maradona as well as the good side. So if you're a writer, it's actually a joy to write about him because, as I say, it's not just the good. There's where did the funding come for his purchase? The drug issues that he had at Napoli, the whole people he was hanging out with.
Where did the funding come from?
That's a good question, and there's speculation, and I'm definitely not going to give an opinion on that.
I guess pick up the book to find out, huh?
But yes, there's the famous press, when he gets introduced at the press conference, a French journalist does ask that question and is kind of is escorted out of the building pretty quickly because he asks if there is any link between Maradona's purchase and the Camorra, and he's moved swiftly on, so leave it at that. But yeah, they suddenly come out with this world record transfer fee to be able to buy him.
Well, if you want to read more about it, chapter 5 or chapter 3, I literally just look at it and I already forgot. But
chapter
5 and Argentina and Napoli. Yeah, fantastic. Giovanni, you have any memories?
Yeah, I mean, it was game changing because I think culturally there was like a big divide between the north and the south of Italy, with the north being a lot more richer, developed. A lot more of the northern teams had a stronghold on Serie A and the championships, with like perhaps maybe Roma being one, like below the belt of the Apennines to have won. Cagliari was another team that just came out of nowhere with Gigi Riva in the 60s, like to win a Scudetto. And then you had Napoli, which was representative of like all of the south of Italy, I would say at the time, just given their just the centrality to what it represented culturally, and for them to cop Maradona in the 80s from Barcelona.
Yeah,
it was huge. It was a huge coup.
And Dominic mentions the shock Maradona experience with the anti-Southern chants and disgusting things that were said or posters that were visible.
Yeah, and you make a good point in that actually Napoli in a way was the perfect club for Maradona.
Yes.
Because he was kind of that scrappy underdog, the El Pibe from Argentina. He had the dark side of, he wasn't averse to a sneaky handball if it was needed, whatever it took to win.
I wonder what you talk about.
I don't know where I get that from. And so it was also almost a perfect match for Napoli because they were seen in the same way. And so, they were kind of this team from the south. They, as Gio says, they were looked down upon by the teams of the north. And so it was kind of a perfect match, although I don't think Maradona even himself quite knew what he was getting himself into when he went to Napoli in terms of press coverage and just the heat of exposure that he would get down there. But no, I think actually Maradona and Napoli, in a way, were a match made in heaven.
Yeah, and beyond the club in and of itself, I think I 100% agree with you. Like, he would never have been the type of player to go to like a Juventus, which is a very corporate club. If it's very corporate now, it was corporate by 1980 standards. But even Naples as a town was perfect for Maradona. Culturally, just the temperature of it in terms of like the sheer type of love and emotion that they kind of put into their fandom. It's not like Turin. Turin and people from Turin are like really cold by nature and demeanor, and that's not people from Naples. And so it was a match made in heaven. And I'm not a Napoli fan, like obviously I'm a Juventus fan, but it was good. It was fun to see, and it's still fun. It's fun to see the love that like people in Naples had for him for so long, and he was the one that brought the Scudetto. He brought them all of this like limelight up until like the recent Scudetto that was won a couple of years ago. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, going back to discussing Juventus in your book, and there's plenty of chapters. You said how many stories are about Juventus. You can't really ignore Juve if you're talking about uh, Italian football, the 90s. Let's talk about the ponytail. I mean, I've spoken to many people who said they've never seen a player so talented, and he's the reason they became Juventus fans. Do you agree that Baggio's golden age was at Juve?
Yes, yes, I would agree with that. I mean, obviously he rises up with Fiorentina, but he does have injury problems there. But it's really when he gets to Juve and those first 3 years that he's winning the Ballon d'Or and
Mm.
scoring a shed load of goals and winning the UEFA Cup for them. You might have. It depends how far you got into the book, but if you have read the book, you will find out that Baggio is my favourite player from that whole era. I absolutely love the guy. I did a chapter on Fiorentina, but it's called Il Divin Codino because it's really a love letter to Baggio more than anything. And then I cover him again under Juve. But no, I mean, if anybody listening to this, and they're probably Juve fans, so I don't know, but if anyone hasn't ever really seen Baggio, just go check out a YouTube highlights reel because the man was amazing. And again, he was very slight. I mean, not a big guy, pretty frail looking, playing in this era, as I say, when it was very physical. And he glides around the field. That's the best word I can think of to describe Baggio. He glides. Yeah. And I mean, some of his goals where he'll just get the ball at the halfway line, just run, take on everybody, even go around the keeper. I mean, fantastic player. And my pet peeve always, and I had a discussion with somebody else once, is whenever you talk about the 1994 World Cup, and if you say the word Baggio, everyone will go, oh yeah, the guy who missed a penalty in the final. And that drives me crazy because they wouldn't have even got to that final without him. He's the one who drags them through the knockout phases. And he's basically exhausted at the end. He's not the only one who misses. Baresi misses, and I can't remember, Masala, I think, is the other person who misses. So he just happened to be the one who went last. But that's that whole image of him bent over, looking down, sad after he misses the penalty. I hate that. That's what people associate with Baggio. They need to associate his time at Juve when give him a free kick anywhere near the area and he would just pop it in the top, and just a beautiful player to watch. Absolutely stunning.
Absolutely, yeah. Some people say top 5 ever. We will go, and then maybe not top 5, but we will refer back to you about your top 4 Mount Rushmore players of the 90s. But Dominic, I actually went to see Juventus against Real Madrid in LA at Rose Bowl. And when I figured out which goal that happened, which actual goal he was shooting in, when I looked at that part of the field, it was just goosebumps, because being in that stadium and realizing that's where it happened. It was just...
Well, I actually live quite close to the Rose Bowl. I used to run around there. And it is the thing that really hits you is obviously living in LA in June. I mean, it is ferociously hot, and the Rose Bowl is just a huge concrete bowl with no shade.
It's awful.
And, they made them play the World Cup final at midday because of obviously European time and wanting to get it in the evening. And no wonder it was 0-0 and a fairly dull game. You should never be making anybody play a final at midday in California in a concrete bowl.
Yeah, well, that was my first World Cup, and my dad told me, this is why finals are always boring. You should always watch the semifinals, because there's something about semis that make the teams perform 110%, and they're very cautious in the finals. So yeah, that was one of those finals that was 0-0. And I don't know, Giovanni, any memories of that World
Yeah,
Cup? We
just
were little with you. We were like a year
no.
apart.
No. My first World Cup was 1990 Italian Open.
Oh, and there's a chapter about it.
Right. So that was awesome. 94 was less awesome for obvious reasons, right? Like the penalties, man. It killed the nation for a little bit. It really did.
Yeah.
We had so to kind of give you a better sense, the 80s, like outside of 82, which was like a weird season for Italian soccer because of it was like a very politically charged era. There was a lot of strife with some betting scandals and stuff like that. After that, it was kind of like the heyday, like the golden age, and you had these squads and rosters of amazing players. Like you had people riding the bench that would be starters now, and we couldn't. In 86, couldn't get it. 90, couldn't get it. 94, that wasn't happening, right? And then 98 as well, right? Like Baggio, there was the whole the duality Baggio Del Piero. So 94, it kind of it crushed the nation, man. It crushed the nation so hard. I remember crying so hard when that
Of
happened.
course.
I was 10 years old. I was crushed. But no, Dominic's absolutely right because so my mom's Nigerian, and then Italy had to go through Nigeria, and Nigeria was
2 minutes away from losing.
Exactly until
Baggio saves them.
Baggio.
Yeah, I would argue that Italy were incredibly lucky in that 94 World Cup. I mean, if you think about it, they lost to Ireland in the first game.
Yeah.
They were Norway, they had the famous Baggio. Well, they were down to 10 men and Baggio being substituted. They were the worst team to get through the groups. They got through as kind of the worst of the third places to make it. And then, as I say, they almost were out against Nigeria. And then they suddenly kind of clicked after that. It's funny because for me, being English, 90 World Cup was just the perfect World Cup for me. And that was part of the reason I fell in love with Italian football was because of 90. I was just the right age. I was at college. So you're watching every game in a big hall with 50 of you with beers. And it's funny because going back, I've looked at it for the World Cup book. Italia 90 wasn't a great World Cup in terms of football when you actually watch it. It was pretty dire. But I just have these rose-tinted, and most English people do at my age, memories of it because it was futuristic. The stadium were amazing. The kits were amazing. The graphics on the TV were different. We had Nessun Dorma in England as the music that everybody knows. And you still hear Nessun Dorma, and anyone my age will immediately say World Cup. It was just, for me, it was the perfect World Cup at that time. And yeah, that's kind of, I think for a lot of English people, actually, that's what leads to then Channel 4 showing it is they fell in love with Italy from that World Cup.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Italians loved their stadiums from the 90s so much that they still have them and they still play in them. So going back to, obviously I didn't catch any of the 80s, but it's a really underrated area as well. So tell me, in a more broad sense, Calcio of 80s and 90s, what made it special? What was that X factor that kept bringing all of the talent to Italy, or maybe it was homegrown, a lot of it? What was the fun part about it? What was that special thing that kept fans coming back?
I think the key moment was really Berlusconi taking over Milan, because what then happens is he pumps a lot of money into the club, and they go out, obviously get the Dutch trio, Van Basten, Gullit and Rijkaard, and it sets off this chain reaction. So you've already got Heysel, so you've got the English out of the way now, so somebody's kind of got to take over in Europe because the English aren't there anymore. And Berlusconi's money puts Milan on the map. He gets Sacchi in, and they start obviously winning trophies at a European level. And it almost starts a chain reaction in Italy, like a nuclear war of spending. So all of the owners then are trying to outdo each other. So you get Inter doing the purchase of a German threesome, who play for them. You've got, so I think, so you've got Milan there. You got Juve still obviously funded by the Agnellis, but you've got a lot of other new money coming in to clubs as well. And it becomes this chain reaction where all the best players start being, or a lot of the best foreign players get signed to play in Italy. It becomes self-fulfilling because they start winning things in Europe. And so if you're a great player, South American or outside of Italy, you then want to play in Serie A. So as I say, it becomes a cyclical. It becomes the best league. People want to play there. They win more. People want to play there. And it was just perfect because Germany didn't really have the money to bring in a lot of foreign players, the way their clubs are funded. England was out of the picture because they didn't have European football. Spain was still really just Real and Barcelona. And what was beautiful about this era with Serie A is when you look at the European finals, you've got 10 different teams playing in it. Now, even when England was dominant in the late 70s in European Cup, it was really Liverpool, Forest and Villa, so 3 teams at the most. The beauty of Serie A at this time was you could have Parma suddenly in finals. So it wasn't just a big traditional Milan, Inter, Juve. Say you had Napoli, you had Torino, you had Parma, you had
Sampdoria.
Sampdoria, I was just gonna
Sampdoria
say,
in there.
which is I saw. Sorry to interrupt. I saw Sampdoria mentioned, and it was so sad because they're going down to Serie C now. You know, it's
maybe not.
Yeah, we don't. They're still under discussion apparently.
Yeah.
Lazio was dominant at that. Lazio were getting to finals at that time. So yeah, that's what made it for me so interesting is the breadth of the talent. It wasn't just, and Fiorentina as well. It wasn't just 3 teams or something dominating. It wasn't just Juve and the 2 Milan teams. It just showed how strong Italian football was. If you look at like the UEFA Cup, almost every final across that period has an Italian team in it. I think there's only one that doesn't. And I think there were 4 that were all Italian finals. This is over 11 seasons.
wow.
So pretty incredible. And even when you think about the European Cup, which is the biggest one of all, if you go from kind of 88 when Milan win it, there's only the Red Star Marseille final that doesn't involve an Italian club for 11 seasons. I mean, that's an incredible period of dominance. Now, and it wasn't all just Milan; it was Juve as well, and it was Sampdoria in the European Cup. So
we don't talk about Juve's final performances on this podcast.
Yeah, but the first one was when they won with Lippi, and then it was back to back. You know.
Yeah.
Dortmund, Real.
Yeah, you do have a. I mean, it's. I'm looking at the book. It's so beautifully written. Just the chapter names are. Did you come up with the chapter names yourself? Because
yes.
I love naming the podcast episodes. I find something that was kind of stood out in the episode, and I name it a funny name. But I love your names here. Of course.
Thank you. It was fun trying to come up with them.
What was your favorite chapter name here?
Favorite chapter name? Probably Mondonico's chair, because you have to really know what that is.
Yeah, what is that?
Fan. If you're a Torino fan, you know what it is. If you don't, you don't.
What about 60? Oh, sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. It was the final when they play Ajax, and they literally hit the woodwork, I think, 3 times. Because in a way, Torino's so sad because they're almost a cursed team. You know, you've got the Superga disaster, obviously, that affected them. Sure. You've got Gigi Moroni, his death. They always feel like a cursed club. And then they finally get to this final against Ajax, and everything just goes against them again. And there's a point in the game when he just waves his chair around in the air in frustration. So that was probably my favorite one on that.
There's what is chapter 13, 61 Days of Madness?
So that's the summer of, I think it's 92 off the top of my head, when the transfer record gets broken 3 times in 61 days, because that was another thing that just showed the strength of Serie A at the time. The transfer record kept getting broken, and there's 61 days when, let me think off the top of my head, Juve by Vialli, Milan by Papan. So it's Milan by Papan first, then Juve step up and break the record by buying Vialli, and then Berlusconi comes back and he buys Lentini and breaks the record again. So yeah, they literally smashed the transfer record 3 times across the summer, and that was just a really good sign of how powerful Italian football was at that time.
And then I
You
kept
meant
a lot too. So
you mentioned Papin. I feel like after he retired, people kind of forgot, but he was an amazing French player. He was. I feel like he miss out on World Cup '94 because France were not in it, and I feel like
Mhm.
we missed on seeing him at the World Cup. If you go back and check out his highlights, he's just a madman, and
Oh,
I'm no fan
the
of.
man could volley a ball. Put it that way. That man could really volley a ball. No, he was great. Lentini was a sad story because Lentini's the one who then gets involved in a car crash, and is never really the same after that. So that was the sad one. Again, a Torino player, and then Vialli obviously was pretty successul.
Giovanni,
yeah.
you got anything for our guest?
No, this speaks to me because I just a lot of like U.S. like fans just kind of got to Serie A in the 2000s, and so there's a big void for me to try to like reminisce when it comes to like this golden era. And that was when I just grew up with it. I watched Serie A all the time, tutto il calcio minuto per minuto, like all of the shows and everything. It's kind of like that's what made me fall in love with the sports. So it's definitely like great to reminisce about it and to hear about it from your perspective and all of the research that you've done as part of your book. However, looking forward, I guess I had a question. Just like looking forward now and like seeing the state of Serie A now after seeing what it was. How do you what do you see as a potential route for it to evolve and get back to that golden era, or are those times completely gone and the Premier League is just so far ahead that there's no catching up with it anymore?
I would say that financially, Italian clubs aren't the same anymore. They can't compete with the Premier League in terms of what the Premier League can spend. And also, you've got obviously Real and Barcelona in Spain being Barcelona actually financially, no, not at the moment, but still Real Madrid. I think the issue with Italy, I mean, they are still an attractive place to play. I mean, look at Inter. They've got to the Champions League final this year. They got to a Champions League final 2 years ago. So there is still success there. Italian teams are still successful. It's just they don't have the purchasing spending power that they used to have, but it's still an attractive place to live if you're a player, an attractive league to play in. There's a lot about the Italian lifestyle that I would say, given the option of being able to live in Rome and Manchester fans don't have a go at me, but living in somewhere like Manchester, I think I would pick Rome any day. So there is still that cultural advantage that Italy has, but they just don't have the money to compete. But the teams like Inter and Juve will always attract talent because they're big teams. Milan, they're just a bit of a mess at the moment, sadly. Sadly for Italian football, they're a bit of a mess. But if you look at the Serie A this year, it's fantastic. I mean, if you want to follow a league and you want excitement, Serie A is the place to be. I mean, we're going into the last week now, and most of the other leagues are all settled, and it's kind of no surprises. Liverpool win by a massive margin, PSG win by a huge margin, but the fun is all in Italy. And
last 5 seasons that comes down to barely last couple of match days, right? It's been a competitive league.
I would argue that Serie A is the one to watch at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, at some point we had 4 different champions in 4 different years, and that kind of speaks to my biggest problem with it is that they don't promote it well. They have so many resources. The designers online, you can find these kids that do either mock-ups of kits or they do complete rebrands, like our friend Dan Colosimo. He literally presented a whole rebrand of Serie A, and he was shopping it around and sending it to Juve. And I feel like my problem is with the promotion of Serie A is we have so much history. If only they would not modernize it, but make it a little more palpable for a modern fan, you could easily market it really well. It's just they choose not to. I don't know. Maybe I'm just going on a tangent here, but
I'm not sure if marketing is necessarily the challenge. Like, I think people know about Serie A, right? I think the biggest problem is that, in my opinion, that Real Madrid and Barcelona had outsized appeal with the fact that they had Messi and Ronaldo in the age of social media, right? And the golden age of social media, and then that's all you saw. And then they both of them drove a ton of eyeballs to the teams that they were playing. Look at Messi now at Inter Miami. Like it's you go whenever Inter Miami is playing, that stadium is sold out. And we're talking about the MLS. With Italy, I think it's less of a marketing problem and more specifically an issue with just the bureaucracy and how the league is run. And I think without getting into the machinations of like what that is, like there's Serie A does not have as much power within the league as some of the other smaller leagues like Serie B, Serie C, Serie D. And so they're kind of hamstrung to really in their decision making power. And I think even within like the presidents of Serie A, you have like little cliques, and you can never come to like one agreed upon strategy to better market and grow Serie A. So I think you kind of stalled there. Like marketing is great once you have a good product to market. I think there's a good product to market within Serie A, as Dominic said, as you've said. It's been exciting the past 5 seasons, but then how do you get more eyeballs to it? How do you kind of
But
make it
how
more
do you get
appealing?
the way you get eyeballs to Serie A is you clean up the stadiums, and I'm not talking about clean. I'm talking about get rid of 3 rows of advertising boards, get rid of the floodlights that are so dim, the night games. I mean, look at Atletico Madrid. If you watch their highlights or if you see their photos, the lighting is so beautiful at the stadium. Literally, lights can change the way the game looks on TV. The pitches look dark green. They're not made for eyes of 2025. You know what I mean? It's money. I mean, Giovanni's making the money sign. This is audio only, by the way, but he's completely right. But we've talked about we've talked about Serie A being behind the times so many times here. People don't want to listen to us
Yeah,
talk about
I
it
do. I
anymore.
do think, having grown up in England, one of the issues is the stadia being too far back from the pitch, because you just don't get that same atmosphere. Now you get the tifos, which are amazing, and
Mhm.
Italy does that better than anybody. But there isn't that closeness of a stadium like somewhere like Anfield, where they're right by the pitch. And I do sadly think, outside of Italy, there's still a bit of a stereotype about Italian football, which is unfair. But you still get a little bit of, oh, it's Catenaccio, even though
Mhm.
it's like 60s. It's not exciting as, say, the Premier League in people's minds. They still think of it as being 1-0s and 2-0s, which is unfair. But it's still, I think, sadly, a stereotype that exists in some people's minds.
My argument to that is look at big derbies that go on in England and big teams playing each other in Italy. It is so still exciting with whatever goes on in the stands and the results and the passion players still feel. And it's Italy. They're freaking crazy, all of them. Because
Completely agree.
they're grandmas and grandpas were fans of certain teams, so it's so entrenched in the culture. And you look at EPL, yeah, 2006 until 2010, 12, the big teams playing was an event. Nowadays, I don't even know when City is playing United or when United plays Liverpool anymore, or those big big games are so sterilized to me now. But anyways, we won't get into that. What I wanted to touch on is Marcello Lippe is one impressive man. Looking into his eyes is enough to tell you that you are dealing with somebody who is in command of himself and his professional domain. Those eyes are sometimes burning with seriousness, sometimes twinkling, sometimes rarely assessing you. And always they're alive with intelligence. Nobody could make the mistake of taking Lippi lightly. Sir Alex Ferguson's book. I love the respect these two showed for each other, and I am no fan of United ever since 1999. Ever since they they came back against us, and that was the day I started hating United. But seeing the respect between those two giants of the game is awesome. Did you have fun reading the chapter about Juventus in the 90s?
Oh, definitely. The whole, I mean, what's not to love about reading about players like Del Piero and then Inzaghi coming along and Zidane. So, I mean, that was a beautiful team to write about. And they had some classic games against Manchester United at that time in the European Cup groups. Some really great games. There was one when Manchester United, I think their players were talking about they'd never been played off the pitch so much as they had against playing against Juve, which is where Ferguson gets his great respect for Lippi from. But no, I mean, any team that can basically get to 3 Champions League finals in a row, I mean, I know they lost 2, but they still got to 3 Champions League finals in a row, you have to have huge respect for. And that was a beautiful team, because you had kind of Baggio still right at the start, still playing. And then obviously he gets moved on and they take the punt on Del Piero, which I hadn't really.
Whatever happened to that guy?
I don't know. But that was really, I hadn't really known too much about that. It's actually quite interesting the way Del Piero comes in and they take the gamble and say, all right, we'll move on Baggio and we're going to bet everything on this youngster. And that didn't work out too badly for them. And then watching some of the Zidane highlights, he has an absolute blind of a game against Manchester United in one of the European Cup games. That was a joy to do. That's what YouTube is for. You go back and catch up these highlights. It's like, oh my God, because you remember Zidane being good, but you forget how good he really was.
Majestic.
Let me tell you, no. You never forget how good he was.
Yeah.
I'm serious, because even as a kid watching, I still remember some of his performances, especially. I know it's not for Juventus, but his game against Brazil, kids will watch the highlights, but I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that game, because against Brazil, this man didn't put his foot wrong once. It was a 10 out of 10 performance. I'm not going to get into it, but you mentioned
talking to a man whose mother is Brazilian, so that causes me great pain, that final.
Yeah, I know. I read the acknowledgments. You mentioned that your mom instilled the love for Brazilian football into you, but you mentioned you're going back to Lippi and Baggio. Baggio wasn't a huge fan of Lippi's approach to man management, and Lippi wasn't a huge fan of over-reliance on injury-prone stars. So during Lippi's first season, the midfield genius has suffered at times an injury, leading Lippi to rely more upon Del Piero. That's crazy. I mean, going from taking a risk from Baggio, who's divine, to going to Del Piero and making him a Champions League winner and later a World Cup winner as well. That's brilliant. That's Lippi for us. I mean, I run a Instagram page, and sometimes I post rumors about upcoming coaches, and obviously Juve are in the dumps right now, where a lot of people mention Lippi's name, and I'm like, he's not going to come back. How old is he now?
I finished my coverage in the 90s, so I don't actually even cover the fact that Lippi comes back again in the early 2000s and has success. I think he leads them up to 2 championships in the early 2000s. So, yeah.
Champions League final against Milan too. So,
that is speaking of games where I cried, man. That was the last time I cried over a football game.
Man.
2003. Man, what a heartbreak.
There's this little story that because Trezeguet missed one of the penalties in that final, and I think when Lippi went to the final with Italy against France, and I think
he hit the post.
I think Trezeguet misses it too.
Yep, he hit the.
He went to him and he was like, "Hey, at least you owed me one for missing the one against Milan." So
that's interesting. Dominic, but I don't want to take up much of your time. Obviously, we can talk about it for hours and hours. And I will be, like I said, reading is for losers, but I will be reading this book. Unless reading is for losers unless it's a book with illustration or about sports. There
are photos in there.
What's that?
There are photos in there for you.
Oh, the PDF version that you sent me didn't have any, but
we'll have photos.
Please pick up the book. Where actually, before we get into it, we didn't mention where you can pick up the book for those listening.
Sure. At the moment, it's available for pre-order on Amazon UK and on Amazon US. Funnily enough, actually, I was looking on Amazon UK earlier, and it's the number one most sought after book at the moment under football. So that's very exciting. There's been a lot of positive feedback. So yeah, you can get it for pre-order on Amazon, and then once you get to June 2nd, it will be formally published, and then it will be available in kind of a normal W.H. Smith's, Waterstones, things like that.
Yeah, it's definitely not available on US Amazon because I checked. I wanted to get it, but
you can get it on pre-order, but it's September. It's
fantastic.
in September.
Can't wait, man. I can't even imagine writing a book. The research, and I mean, I do like minute long reels, and nuts. They will pick at very little details, so I can't imagine the accuracy you had to follow. But it's an awesome book. It's like tailor-made for our listeners. So
thank you.
All of that aside, last thing I wanted to ask you is give me the Mount Rushmore, the top 4 greatest Serie A players of 1980/1990s.
Okay.
Weird. Let's go with 5.
Yeah, I would love to hear your opinion.
5? Okay. I will start off with Baggio.
Oh no, we lost you there for a second.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're still here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I would start off with Baggio. I mean, we've already talked about him, but he is.
Now, do they before you're gone? Do they do the ponytail in the back of the mountain?
They could, yes, exactly.
Like a waterfall, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I love that guy. He would definitely be my number 1. Maradona, just because of who he was, and as we said, Napoli had won nothing before he came along, and then they end up with 2 Serie A wins, the UEFA Cup win, and the fact that he's such a deity in the city. And as we said, he helped them fight against the North, and he was kind of just the perfect player for that team, and playing in an era that was very tough to play in, and just a joy to watch him. Of that, I would say Van Basten would be up there. Van Basten's a really hard one because it's such a tragic story. He was absolutely brilliant at times with Milan, like literally unplayable, especially in that kind of Sacchi team when he wins the Ballon d'Or and when he's Capocannoniere a couple of times. I mean, again, if people don't know Van Basten really well, watch a highlight reel. Some of his goals are amazing. He could head the ball. He could do it with his feet. He could do everything. I mean, he was a tall guy, but he could dribble. Just some... there's one game when he plays against, I think it's Gothenburg in the European Cup, and he scores 4 goals, and one of them's a bicycle kick. I mean, just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, he was a complete beast. And
yeah.
And I read somewhere that the amount of goals that he scored in his short career is unfathomable. If he kept going, he would have been.
If you include Ajax as well, I mean, he scores 129 for 205 appearances for Milan. But what's so sad is how it all ends. He has the ankle injury, and he just can't shake it off, and he goes through this horrendous rehab on the ankle injury that just will not heal properly, and he's in agony, and he finally just has to call it a day. And it was a very emotional game when they bring him out on the San Siro stadium before one of the games, and Capello's actually in tears, and there's such a tragic way to end. I mean, he retired, I think, I can't remember what he was, but he wasn't very old when he ended up retiring. He should have had a lot more in him. But
I actually, as a kid, still remember him retiring, and I was really sad, even as I didn't know much. I still don't, but back in those days, it was really sad to see him retire, because even as a kid, you knew how great he was. And do you think with the modern medicine and what we've achieved as far as players getting back out there faster, you think he would have benefited from the medicine nowadays?
Yes, I think they acknowledge it was kind of a botched operation. And it was
shame.
It was a shame. And then I would say fourth on Franco Baresi, I would have to have in there as an Italian.
Fantastic.
He makes his debut, right back in 78. He was age 17. I mean, talk about a player who's just a one-club hero. He's 20 years he spends with Milan. He makes over 500 appearances. And you think about it, he was made captain in 1982. I think he was age 22 at the time.
Wow.
He was there in the bad times in the early 80s when they went through the relegations. And then, obviously was a stalwart in the Saki team. And after that, part of that great defence that had Tassotti, Costa Curta, Maldini, him. I mean, if you want a classic Italian back four, you don't get any better than that. He was part of the Invincibles team for Milan as well. I mean, just a fantastic player. And not a big player for a centre-back. He was actually fairly small, but just read the game like nobody else could. Was a fantastic at organising the defence, that whole high line that Milan played with. He was kind of in charge of that. He was a runner-up in the Ballon d'Or once, which was pretty rare for defenders at that time. So he was an amazing player.
All right. So Baggio,
Maradona, Van Basten, Baresi. And if I had to give a shout out to a couple of others who were just outside that, I would say Asprilla, just because I love him as a character.
Interesting.
I could have written a whole chapter just on Asprilla, but I managed
the Colombian legend.
Yeah, there's a few good Asprilla stories when you go and look at
that. He's Parma, right?
He's Parma, Colombian, but a real character outside of a game. Mateus would be in there. Beppo Signori, I think, is overlooked and shouldn't be overlooked. He was an incredible striker for Lazio. He was fantastic. Sadly, because this was about Italian dominance, the Fiorentina only had that when they were under Baggio. So I couldn't really write about Batistuta, but I would have loved to have written about Batistuta.
Giovanni used to learn.
Because I have never seen a man hit a ball so hard and so viciously as Batistuta. He was a beautiful player for Fiorentina, and then obviously goes and wins the Serie A with Roma at the end. And then the other two would be Del Piero and Zidane. I would mention those. And then Ronaldo, obviously, for Inter. But that's right towards the end of my time there, Ronaldo. But he's obviously one of my favourites, especially my mother.
And you do have a chapter dedicated to him, right?
I do pick him up at the end with his Inter times. But yeah, I mean, again, Ronaldo, I could watch highlights of him all day. Just an absolute fantastic. But those would be the ones for me.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much. That was so the mountain. When you do Maradona, you pick the spot where the snow doesn't melt, right? It's just a white streak. Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to, but
you couldn't resist it.
No disrespect to the legend, but he did have his problems. Let's not act like I'm shocking people here.
As a writer, you want people to have some problems. It makes it more fun. And that's actually the other thing about Italian football. Somebody said to me, they said, but it's always tainted by all these scandals and whatever. And I said, well, that actually makes it more fun to write about. If you're a writer, you don't want it to be just purely boring story. The whole part of the fun of writing about Italian football is all the scandals and the conspiracy theories.
Sure.
The Italians, no one likes a conspiracy theory as much as the Italians, and it makes it great fun to write about.
Giovanni knows all too well. But one last thing, what do you think about the game nowadays, comparing EPL to Serie A? I know we talked about Serie A, but I want to hear your comparison to how cleaned up EPL is. Like even going back to 1980s EPL, you see those big patches of dirt next to the goalkeeper, and in 20 years they've done amazing work, but I just don't know if it wasn't to benefit of the game, because it's just so sterilized now. It's just so careful. Just like in Italy, we still have the shithousery, as they say. We still have those, what was that when the fans brought a moped to the game? I think it was Inter. I mean, there's still photos of. Still in 2025, there's photos of Italian fans bringing sandwiches and mozzarella to the games, and they're sitting drinking wine at some stadiums. It's just, I don't know. I love that part of the game a lot, like what fans do and stuff surrounding the game. I just don't think you get a lot of that in England. And again, just my personal opinion.
Yeah, it's hard for me because I've lived here now for over 20 years. So it's a long time since I've been to an English game. But I mean, I grew up going in the 80s to London games a lot. games in London a lot. And yeah, it was a very different atmosphere. I think the problem now is just the way the ticket. For me, the biggest problem is ticket prices. I think that's what spoiled the game in terms of atmosphere, especially in the Premier League. Is it's so expensive to go see a game now, and a lot of the tickets kind of get snapped up by what they call tourist fans.
Sure.
And I think that's spoiled a lot of the atmosphere. As far as the pitches go, I think it's a good thing that they're better pitches.
Absolutely.
You can play better football on them. I think a lot of the problems in England in the 80s was because of the pitches that created the whole long ball game, where it's like, well, you can't pass through mud, so you might as well hoof it up to a big striker and see how that works and bypass it all. So I think that is an advantage. But for me, I think the saddest thing is that a lot of true football fans are being priced out of it and don't get to experience the atmosphere that we used to experience within a ground. I mean, it's hard because I don't go to them so much now, but I get the feeling with certain grounds that it can be quite sterile. I mean, you still have the Anfields of the world and places that have a really good atmosphere. But
I've heard Anfield is kind of overrated as well.
Yeah, but there is a bit of sterility about it all because it is such an expensive. They've priced a lot of people out of football now.
Hey, I mean, you're preaching to the choir. Juventus atmosphere at the games is it can be really poor because of the tourists and because of only Curva Sud kind of supporting. But when they're quiet, the whole stadium is quiet, which
it's hard because I get it. I get that if you're a tourist, you want to go see the team you support from overseas. I completely understand that.
Sure.
I mean, if I went and traveled to Italy, I would want to go to a game to take in the atmosphere. So I completely get why it is like it is. But I think it does sadly impact the atmosphere slightly.
Yeah. If I go to the stadium, I'm only sitting in Curva Sud. You get the flags in front of you, but it's a great atmosphere of nonstop singing. Giovanni, Dominic, thank you, boys. Giovanni, if you have any last questions for our
great.
New friend,
just looking forward to getting the book once we're able to get it stateside. So
we will definitely post. Let's keep in touch, and we'll post
so
a link to it, of course.
Yeah.
Dominic, what's your next project? And then we'll say goodbye. Tell us what's on the horizon.
I'm still writing for These Football Times, so I actually have their next magazine is coming out soon. So I have an article that I actually need to go and finish this week. So there's that too. But on the book front, there is one that I have started, an idea that's poking around. It would be going back to England, and it's more looking at the kind of, I don't want to give too much away, but one of the big rivalries in England, in English football around the 2000s. I feel one of the things missing from football a bit in Premier League at the moment is a really, really good rivalry over 7 years, that kind of thing. And people will probably work out that there was a fantastic rivalry for about 6 years.
I'm a big fan of These Football Times. They got
we were talking about that earlier.
One.
Yeah.
Stupendous. So
thank you. Yes, I will be working on that tonight.
Beautiful.
For the next
Dominic, I think it's safe to say we're friends now.
Thank you. Yes, I've loved it. Really good fun.
If there's anything you want to discuss or just come on, just with no reason, we're happy to have a real life author on instead of the jamokes that we usually have on. But Giovanni knows what he's doing, know what I'm talking about. Boys and girls, this has been a special edition. Obviously, we are preparing for a special episode number 300 of the Turin Giants podcast. It's been 13 years, 300 episodes. So we shall bring you all of the previous hosts, including Giovanni, and we'll reminisce about 13 years of recording this podcast for our awesome audience. But for today, I just want to thank Dominic again for coming in. Maybe we'll see you at the World Cup. I would love to go back to and watch the game in LA.
To have a conversation then, and thank you. As I
Hopefully,
say, so
this time Italy is in it, right?
Exactly.
One can only hope. So
if you can't get into this World Cup, then you're really in trouble.
Yes, big time.
But congratulations on your 300th.
Oh, I appreciate you. Yeah, Italy, you're allowed to miss one World Cup. You're not allowed to miss two, let alone three. So let's make it in, and make a splash.
All
All right. Thank you, boys and girls.
Thank you.
As always, stay hydrated, check on your friends, and Forza Juve.
All right.
Del Piero, rete del Piero. Pallone con i contadini per Nedved, Pirlo, la conclusione in rete. Andrea Pirlo, un gol pazzesco. Del Piero, gol! Alex Del Piero. Pogba, rete! Un gol incredibile! Pogba fa esplodere lo Juventus!